A man remembers being a little boy and finding a shack. But what was in the shack puzzles him to this very day. And then we travel to Colorado. So take a look at the story of a young girl who's woken up one night by her barking dog. When she looks out the window to see what could be causing all the commotion, she has no idea she's about to peer into the unknowable. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a lot of stuff to cover, so first off, gliding into Dead Rabbit Command like a flying squirrel. Everyone give a round of applause for a returning Patreon supporter, Dave H. Woohoo, yeah, wee! He's all flying around our heads. We're slapping him, we're clapping on him. I don't know what that was supposed to be, Dave H. You're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the Patreon, I totally understand. I really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is the place to go to listen to a show about something that rhymes with show. Dave H., let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the Dead Rabbit dirigible. We're going to leave behind Dead Rabbit Command. Fly us all the way out to Georgia. Nice leisurely flight over the United States. We're looking down at Purple Mountain's majesty and the other stuff in that song. But eventually we get to Georgia. They didn't mention that in the song. They didn't talk about the soupy swamps of the South. We're in Georgia, and we're about to meet a little boy named Paul. So this story took place quite a long time ago. The person who posted this, Paul's not his real name, the person who posted this is now an adult, and he still is having a hard time wrapping his head around exactly what happened. We're in Georgia, and we meet this little boy. This time he's about 10 to 12 years old. Paul. And he lives around here. He's not just on a nature hike. He's not like, I'm from Tennessee and I'm lost. Can you help me find my way back home? He lives in the area. And one of the questions I have about this story is how close. He said the Georgia countryside, but somewhere near his home is a shack. That's a question that's going to pop up in your head a couple of times as I tell this story. And I don't know the answer either. But near his home, it's not miles and miles away, I don't think. It's also not right next door. There's a shack. Near his home, there's this shack. And he goes, one day I was out exploring the woods, either 2 feet away from my bedroom or 400 acres into the woods. I'm exploring the woods, and I come across an old, locked shack. Boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Paul hears a banging coming from inside the shack. And he's watching the door rattle against the door frame as if someone or something is banging on the door from inside the shack. And Paul goes, wow, you know what must have happened? There must be an animal trapped in there. There must be like a raccoon or a baby bear or like 10 squirrels standing on each other's shoulders all banging it at the same time. Because whatever's in there is strong enough to bang on a door and to make it visibly move, right? If like there was like a mouse in there like kicking it, you wouldn't even know. Wouldn't need to. It'd just dig out of the shack. But he walks by and he goes, there must be an animal trapped in there. And he continues on his way. It might be an animal slowly starving to death that fell in through a hole, an unseen hole. It must be an animal. And he just leaves the area. Which I guess, like I'm a city boy. If I heard someone banging on a shack and I thought it was an animal trapped in there, I'd let it out. But I don't live in an area with a ton of wild animals. I may get mauled to death by some bobcat that's in there. He knows a little bit better. He's a country boy. He walks by. He goes on with his day. Well, the next day, he's kind of wandering around the area, and he goes, I wonder what's going on with that shack, that building out there with all the banging. I wonder if it's still banging. Wonder if I go out there, am I still going to hear a rattle, 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 and a bang, bang, bang? So he walks back out to the shack, and sure enough, bang, bang, bang. Something is inside that shack, desperately trying to get out. So this time Paul's looking at the shack and he goes, none of my business. None of my business. I don't know what's in the shack, so I'm going to leave it be. The next day, he walks back out to the shack. I don't know if this took place during summertime or this guy never went to school. Next day, he walks back out to, maybe he did it after school. He walks back out to the shack. It's like, the perfect place to do my homework. I have that calculus test tomorrow. He's all leaning up against the shack. Bang, 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 bang. The banging's still continuing. So it's been 3 days in a row now. He's showing up to this shack. 3 days, he can hear something desperately trying to get out. None of my business, Paul says. This goes on. Guess how long. Paul keeps going back to the shack, keeps hearing the banging, and keeps walking away. Because I had to double check my notes. I was like, there's no way it was this long. 5 weeks. 5 weeks, this kid walks out to the shed, and he hears a bang, and he goes, it's none of my business. But eventually, after 5 weeks, he goes, I guess this is kind of my business. There's something dying in there. I don't know what it is, but it hasn't had any food or water in there unless the shack isn't being used for tools. It's being used to store food and water, and in that case, it can live forever. I don't know what's going on. I failed my calculus test. I don't know why I thought that would be a good place to study. I'm going to tell my dad about the shack. So I think it's far enough from the house that his dad wasn't trying to go to sleep. He's like, Martha, what's that noise? Bang, 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 bang. I think it was far enough away from the house, but not so far away that the kid couldn't make the journey in a day and come back, right? Maybe it was like a 30-minute walk. I don't know. Anyways, he comes home. Dad, you know that shack? Or maybe you don't. Maybe it's close. Maybe it's far. I'm not for sure, Dad. But you know that shack out in the woods? And the dad's like, huh? What shack? And the son's like, yeah, there's a shack in the woods. And I've been swinging by there every day for about 5 weeks. And I'm pretty sure something's in there trying to get out. Imagine the dad's like, wait, what? That's where you've been for the past 5 weeks? We had the cops looking all over for you. They didn't go in the shack direction. He goes, Dad, for the past 5 weeks, I've been going out to this shack. I think there's an animal trapped in it. But it should be dead by now, right? Like, most things can't live without food or water. Definitely not without water for more than a couple days, unless this is like some worm that lives on lava tubes, like some weird exo species that we didn't even think existed until we brought a microscope up to the edge of a volcano. It's banging in there. It's making a lot of racket. I'm surprised you haven't heard it. I'm surprised you haven't noticed I was missing all this time. Keep going out there. And I think it should be dead by now, so I'm a little alarmed by that. I'm a little alarmed that it's banging so loudly. And I swear, Pop, a couple times I got real close to the door, and I heard what sounded like a weak, or that's a weird term, a weak groan, or like a noise, like you don't have enough energy to actually go, you have run out of food, so you just go, or maybe it was more of like a, but you might chalk that up to the wind, right? You'd probably be more like a, something like that. So the dad goes, okay, you probably should have told me about that less than 5 weeks ago. You could have told me about that at any point. You're saying that you're hearing someone banging inside this shack and you hear a low groan or weak groan. Paul's like, yeah, I said weak groan. He's like, okay, whatever that sounds like. Weak groan. Show me where the shack is. So son and father go out into the woods and he shows his dad the shack, and sure enough, there's that banging coming from inside the shack. The dad goes, okay, I got a plan for this. Let's go back to the house. And as they were walking back to the house, Paul realized that his dad looked a little scared by what was going on. So they walk back to the house, and Pops gets his .357 Magnum and tells Paul, you wait here. Don't come out If you hear any shack-related noises, don't worry about it. You just wait at home. And Paul said he waited there for a while, and then all of a sudden he hears a... Now, Paul said he heard the gunshots a few minutes after his dad left the house with the gun. So that's, again, why I'm confused about how close this shack is. But anyways, here's 4 or so gunshots, and then Dad comes home, calls up a couple buddies. They come over, and Paul watches his dad and his dad's friends go to the shack, and they're inside the shack for a bit, and they come out carrying what could only be described, this is how Paul described it, as a person-shaped body bag. He said that this bag looked to be about the size of an adult human, and it looked heavy, like something was inside of it. They were bringing something out of the shed. He goes, from where his vantage point was, he's still at home, he could see the men reacting to the smell. They could see them going, pew-wee, and like holding their nose, and dropping the body, or whatever it was. We haven't gotten to that part yet, but they're like, pew-wee, that sure does stink. They're like, Jerry, pick up your end. It's super stinky on this end, too. But, just do it. We're hauling away whatever this is. He says he could see them reacting to the smell. And you could also see there were flies everywhere. There were flies all over the bag. There were flies coming out of the shack door. There's just flies everywhere. And they take this person-shaped body bag and throw it into the back of one of his dad's friends' trucks. They drive away. Paul, this has puzzled Paul for years, possibly decades. We don't know how old this guy is. But he posted this online under the name OK Buddy Pal Friend. That was his username. He titled the post, Need Help Identifying Entity. And he goes, I think this must have been some sort of cryptid or monster or something like that based on these details. 1, my dad shot it 4 times, but if it was a normal human, you'd only have to shoot him once. 2, hold your questions, don't comment yet, don't fill the YouTube comments just yet. 2, how could it have decayed so fast? Like, he shot it, and then he called the friends, and the friends came over just right after that, and they loaded it up, but I could tell from even how far away I was, which we don't exactly know, that it was stinky. I could see stink lines coming off of it. He goes, I could see the other people around it reacting to how stinky it was, and the flies are everywhere, so he must have shot something that began to decay instantly. And that's why it was so stinky. Now, I am a paranormal researcher. That's what I enjoy to do. I do a lot of times go towards a paranormal angle. Humans aren't made of balloons. Sometimes you have to shoot a human multiple times to kill him. He goes, the .357 Magnum was powerful enough you could kill a human with one shot. Yeah, in ideal conditions. And the idea, he goes, how did it decay so fast? Here's my question. This is what I'm getting at. I think he just heard his dad and his dad's friends murder somebody, a human, in a person-shaped body bag the size of an adult male. If you took a human and locked him in a shed for 5 weeks, he's going to be pretty smelly. He's going to be really smelly. There's going to be flies everywhere. If he's pooping and peeing in that shack, there's going to be a lot of flies there. I mean, basically, that is a fly breeding facility. It's going to be more flies than man in there at the end. Now, the shack is far enough away that the dad didn't hear the knocking, but close enough that from the point that the dad left the house to walk to the shack, this is the first time stamp that we have. It takes a couple minutes. He said a few minutes, so it wasn't a half hour walk through the woods. It took a couple minutes. You could hear the gunshots. That's fine. They can carry quite a distance. But then being able to look out your window and see those details means that this must have been relatively close. What most likely happened was this young man's father and his friends locked a living human in a shack and probably thought he was dead. They may have been waiting for one point or another to dispose of the body, because if you thought he was still alive, you wouldn't leave him in a shack that long. You'd be afraid he'd break out. Now, I'm not a master kidnapper by any means. I mean, maybe that is kidnapping 101. Put him in a shack. Step one, put him in a shack. But my take on this would be this guy's dad and his friends were part of some sort of criminal conspiracy. Maybe they beamed this guy over the head, knocked him out, thought he was dead. Not professionals, amateurs, might have been their first job. Threw him in a shack. Didn't check on him. Thought he was dead. Why would you check on him? And that would be why the dad was scared, not just because... I mean, he didn't think he was a zombie, but I mean, it's possible. But just the fact that he's scared, like, what if this guy gets loose? My kid's right here. Also, he's going to turn me into the police. He dropped the kid off, went back, shot the guy, called the friends who were also in on it, threw it in a body bag. Who has access to a human-sized body bag either? Like, I would need to call in some favors. And actually, up here, I don't think I have any. I don't know of anyone around here who has a body bag. But that's what I think happened. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this story, one, because, I mean, like, right, I could be just a contrarian, right? Because he thinks it's a monster, I think it's a human, and other people go, oh no, that was clearly a human that committed that crime. It was like, it could have been Bigfoot, could have been an alien. You're like, no, I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure all those human fingerprints in the video camera showing the human carrying the axe. I was like, I don't know, could have been a shapeshifter. I can be a contrarian from time to time. But what this makes me think is it was a murder. And he witnessed the aftermath of it. Which, again, this is one of those questions like, what's creepier? What's creepier? That there's a monster in your shack just a few minutes walk from your house? Or that your dad and his friends murdered somebody? This is one of those stories that you have to ask yourself, you're like, Jason, clearly that my dad is a murderer. That's 10 times creepier. If he shot a monster, then I don't have to worry about it anymore. If he's a murderer, who knows what he's going to murder next? Who knows? He may murder me. But yeah, it's one of those pick your poison stories. And I always think it's interesting, too, that there probably is an element that he may have seen more than his brain could have handled, this little 10 to 12-year-old boy. And some of the details have been filled in weird ways. You know, it's like sometimes if we can't comprehend the true terror, our brains can kind of shut off or add details or omit details, or who knows how far away was the shack. But it's an interesting story, and personally, I think this dude witnessed a murder and a kidnapping, right? I think that would be implied. He was stuck in the shack the whole time. Where did he get water from? Who knows? Like, again, there's so many little, like, maybe it really wasn't 5 weeks, maybe it was 5 days, maybe... Because even the fact that he goes, it happened between the ages of 10 and 12, like he had a hard time pinpointing exactly when he heard a monster get shot, in his words, or maybe a human. Fascinating story, though. It's terrifying. And the moral of the story is, don't live in Georgia, don't have family members in Georgia, I guess. Don't be near shacks. I wonder what would have happened if he had opened that door. Dave H., I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the Carpenter copter. We are leaving behind the swampy region known as Georgia. Fly us all the way out to Colorado. Specifically, we're headed out to the town of Uravan, Colorado. I'm pretty sure it's a ghost town now. It was originally a uranium mining town, which, I mean... You had your choice of things to be mined near you. Gold, silver, those would be cool ones. Iron. I'm just naming off all the elements. I'm all magnesium mines. But the very bottom, like the last place you'd want to live by, is a uranium mine. Everyone's coming home from work. Hey, honey, how was your day? Kind of glowy. Kind of glowy. I'm still glowing right now. Oh no, I'm bringing my work home with me. And I'm slowly poisoning my family. I'm pretty sure it's a ghost town now. If it's not, it should be. If it's not, no one should live there. This story takes place a while back. We're looking at July of 1968, so it's an old-timey story. That's only a couple of years before I was born, so I guess it's not that long ago. But July 1968, we're about to meet this young girl. She didn't give her name in this story. We're going to go ahead and call her Carol. Now, Carol was 12 years old, and they lived in the town of Uravan, and everything was fine, except for the incredibly high cancer rate, and everyone was their own nightlight. Everything was pretty fine. Carol lives in this house with her family. She has her mom and her dad, and she shares a room with her brother. And this particular night, they're all fast asleep. Carol slowly opening her eyes. What in the world? What's going on? She hears her dog, Tippy, barking super loud right outside her bedroom window. Ruff, 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 ruff. She's like, what? Oh, come on, Tippy. And she's getting up out of bed. She's rubbing her eyes, and she realizes her brother is still fast asleep as Tippy is just raising all sorts of noise right outside the bedroom window. And she looks over at her brother, and she's like, deep sleeper, I guess. It must be all of that radiation-induced sickness. It really makes your body want to rest as much as it can. Tippy keeps barking, and she can't realize why she's the only one up. She's standing there in the darkness. Her brother's not up. Her parents aren't up, and they're usually the first ones to come outside and shut up Tippy if she's ever barking super loud because a raccoon ran by or a squirrel, or there's a banging from a nearby shack. Parents don't like Tippy barking in the middle of the night. Nobody does. Nobody likes having a dog wake them up. But Carol's the only one who's awake. She looks out her bedroom window because she wants to see what Tippy's barking at. And what she sees absolutely stuns her. What she sees is a landed UFO. She sees out in the distance, but relatively close to the house. This is another story. We don't know how close everything is. You're like, Jason, you kept bringing it up that last story. It didn't really make a big difference. I imagined it was going to be a pivotal factor. It didn't. This one, though, we don't know. That's going to be my new thing every episode. I was like, well, we don't know how close this stuff is. The UFO, we don't know how far away it is. It's close enough. You're like, Jason, come on, man. Just get on with the story. It's close enough that she can see details, but it's not so close that... Let's put it this way. She's going to have a little bit of time to react. This one probably is more important how close it is. She sees a landed UFO. She describes it as a circular ship. Classic flying saucer, really. And its landing gears are down. I always love UFO stories. I love them all the time. We haven't been covering a lot recently because I just need to find more, but just the idea of landing gear on a UFO, like that's such a human invention. I know UFOs would have to land, but some of them we've come across, they hover. Some of them are kind of sitting right on the ground. This one actually has like landing gears, little legs to prop it up. I love this phenomenon in whole. She sees these landing gears and she sees a stairway leading out of it. Stairways in space. No, I'm just joking. She sees the stairway. I don't know how many steps are on it. She sees the stairway leading out of the UFO. And remember, Tippy had been barking for a bit. Tippy had seen this UFO and was barking until finally Carol woke up. Tippy probably saw the UFO approach, landing gear come down, the vehicle actually touched ground, stairway come out. By the time Tippy's looking out the window, she sees several reptilian aliens walking around the outside of the UFO. She said that the reptilians were kind of like how you would expect a reptilian alien to look. Green skin, very thin bodies, thin legs, kind of like elongated type of creature, with bright yellow eyes and V-shaped toes. These reptilians also seem to have these backpacks on, almost like they are wearing backpacks. They like a fabric type container on their back. Some of them had more of a hard shell tank, but all of them were carrying a bow. She's looking out the window and she's seeing these visitors from another world, and they're all carrying one of the oldest weapons of mankind, the bow. And it seemed like they were looking around for something. Seems like they were constantly kind of scanning the area, looking for something specific. And Carol couldn't even imagine what this could be, but they were constantly kind of looking around. And then another reptilian walks off the ship. And she said this one, you could just tell from the way it acted and the way that the others reacted to it, this was the leader. Whatever they were here for, this guy was in charge. And she goes, I watched this other reptilian get off the ship and he appeared to be giving them orders. And Tippy's still just barking up a storm. And Carol's kind of peering over the windowsill at this point, trying not to draw attention to herself, when she sees a couple of the reptilians look over towards her, but really looking towards Tippy. And a few of them begin approaching the house. Carol jumps out of her bedroom. She knows something bad's going to happen, right? Generally, reptilian aliens, not the most friendly of alien species as far as what we know, as far as the UFO lore goes. They're probably at the very least going to kill her dog. They're probably upset that this dog's barking. They have bows. They're ready to hunt. Maybe this is a warm-up. She doesn't know why they're here. She doesn't know where they're from. But she knows that Tippy's in danger. She runs out of the bedroom and she runs into her parents' room and she's trying to wake them up. And they won't wake up. Mom, Dad, you gotta help. Something's outside. Something's gonna get Tippy. Tippy's in danger. You hear in the distance, ruff, 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 ruff. Mom, Dad, come on. Wake up. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Finally, and with great effort, Carol is able to wake her mom up, and she goes, My mom slowly came to. It was almost as if she may not have known the exact word when she was 12, but she knows it now. She goes, my mom was acting like she had been sedated. Like trying to wake someone out of a drugged stupor. She goes, my mom with really heavy eyelids, barely open. She's kind of like, Carol, what's going on? And Carol has no time to tell her really what's going on. Plus, also, tip, if you wake your parent up out of deep sleep and you start talking about reptilians about to attack the dog or space aliens, they're not even going to pay attention to you. They're going to tell you to go back to sleep. So she's just like, you got to come to the bedroom. I think Tippy's in danger. She's given her mom the Cliff Notes version and basically has to pull her mom out of bed and drag her across the hall into Carol's bedroom where her brother is still fast asleep. And her mom's like, what? Carol, what is going on? Why are you waking me up? What are you talking about? Come on, Mom, hurry up. Something bad's going to happen to Tippy. And they get to the bedroom window, and Carol looks out the window, and she sees the reptilians still walking around the property. She looks up at her mom, and she goes, Mom, look! And she points out, and her mom is looking out the window, and she simply goes, what? Honey, there's nothing out there. What? Carol, there's nothing out. Come on, Carol, crawl into bed. Just go to sleep. And Carol says, and her mom kind of shuffled her towards Carol's bed. And Carol crawled into bed, and then her mom got into bed with her. The mom's already asleep. Pretty much by the time her head hits the pillow, Mom's asleep. Carol, though, her eyelids are getting heavy as well. She finds herself falling to sleep much quicker than she should. She finds herself fighting the sleep. She's trying to stay awake. She's trying to listen to Tippy's barking. She's trying to stay aware of her surroundings, but her eyelids grow heavier and heavier by the second. And she looks up at her bedroom window. She's laying on the bed, and she looks up, and just at the angle that she's at, just before she completely loses consciousness and joins her mother in sleep, she sees through the window 2 reptilians staring into the bedroom, watching her fall to sleep. The next morning, Carol woke up, and she's like, oh no, I don't hear my dog. The last thing I remember was all the reptile stuff. She runs out of the bedroom, runs into the yard. Tippy is laying there, panting. Totally alive. Totally fine. Didn't have his guts ripped out. Tippy kind of rolls over and looks at Carol and trots over to her. Carol goes, Tippy acted like nothing had transpired the night before. Wasn't scared, panicked, nothing. Tippy said, my mom acted totally normal the next day. Everyone did. Nobody really remembered the events that had happened. It would make sense that the dad and the brother didn't. They were fast asleep, but the mom was just kind of like, the mom may have made a reference that she woke up in the middle of the night because she ended up waking up in Carol's bed the next morning. She must have known something was up. Oh, Carol just had a bad dream, and I slept with her. And life went on. But Carol never forgot that night. She never talked about it. It sounded too crazy. The night that aliens from another world landed in her yard carrying primitive weapons. A night when what can only be surmised is they put her entire family, including her, to sleep. And that when her mother looked out of the window and saw nothing while Carol saw alien invaders tromping through their property, it sounds like a story a kid would make up. At the very most, a fable. At the very least, just a dream. And that was how the story was until the year 2016, 48 years later. Carol's mother had fallen ill, and she was spending her last days in the company of her family and her loved ones. Carol helped take care of her mother while she was sick. And the night before Carol's mother died, they were sitting in the room together, and the mother looked up at her now adult daughter and said, Carol, do you remember when you were a kid? You woke me up. And we went into your room and we looked out that window. Do you remember that? Do you remember that night we both looked out the window and saw those lizard people walking around the property? Carol's mother died the next day after making that statement. And that was the only time her mom ever acknowledged the night they saw the hunters from another world. It's an interesting story. There's so many magical elements. If a child told you this story, you'd be like, what? Everyone fell asleep at the same time and couldn't wake up, and she looked out the window and couldn't see him. As paranormal enthusiasts, as people like you and me, we see some of these elements play out in other stories. But if you're not into UFOlogy, if you're not into paranormal stories, it does sound like a childhood dream. It does sound magical in the sense, because in the real world, we go, 2 people look out a window, they'll see the same thing. Sure, one person might look at the cloud and see Benjamin Franklin. Other guy looks at the cloud and sees a jelly bean. We'll allow for certain amounts of interpretation. But lizard men with bows in your front yard walking around, it sounds false, but it's interesting that so here's there's a couple different ways we could look at this, right? I think the way that I look at it is that the mother did see what was out there, but her mind was clouded. Sometimes we forget about, like in the earlier story, he may have seen something and his brain just couldn't comprehend it, and he got the details mixed up, that little kid with his shack. But this one, it seemed almost to be part and parcel of what the reptilians were doing. They were putting the humans to sleep. And they were actually affecting the mother's vision. I don't think the mom looked out the window and it broke her brain. She couldn't accept the reality of these lizards, which can happen. But because the other things, because everyone's asleep, because the dog's not waking anyone up, because it takes so long for her mother to even come out of this stupor, right? It seemed like she was drugged. And even Carol immediately falls back to sleep once she lays in the bed. Well, not immediately, but within seconds, she looks up, she sees the reptilians, their faces pressed against the window looking in. So it's like the aliens were blocking, like were, in whatever way, technology or however they do it, mental powers were blocking the mom from perceiving them, but she did perceive them. She did see them. And almost, it could have been that she remembered it prior to the day before she died and she just didn't want to talk about it. But it's also possible that in the last stages of life, that whatever mental control was placed, whatever barriers were replaced by these reptilian hunters, were starting to fade. She did not remember that event until the night before she died. So her body is slowly shutting down. That's when the barriers were removed. Which is an absolutely terrifying thought if you think about it. Absolutely terrifying. Because imagine if you are on your deathbed, whether that is a prolonged and slow death. You're like, Jason, this is a real comforting episode. Whether it's a prolonged and slow death, or a fast one. Not too fast, not like falling in a volcano, but you bleeding out on a street corner. Something like that, right? So it's not super fast, not super slow. How long does it take? We don't know. My point is like, imagine you're dying and all of a sudden you remember a ton of stuff that didn't happen. It happened, but your mind was blocked. Again, not from some sort of safety mechanism, because the event was too horrific, but imagine if you didn't even think about it. There was that time you got home from work, you were really tired, you went to bed, and it was almost like you just fell asleep the second your head hit the pillow, and then you're up the next day. You didn't even think about it, right? You go, I wanted to stay up to watch Deep Space Nine, but whatever. But then as you're laying there in that hospital bed, you remember all the times you were visited by unholy things. You remember the door opening up and creatures from another world walking into your bedroom. You remember the procedures they do. You remember the pain that you felt. You remember that one time you were driving home from work and you had what they call highway blindness, where you're just driving, you've driven the same route so many times that this particular time you're driving home and you're like, wow, that was a quick drive. Like, I don't even remember driving. I must have just been in the zone, listening to the music, listening to Dead Rabbit Radio, and I've driven this road 100 times. Highway blindness, it's a term. Or is it? Well, it is a term, but as you're dying, you have memories of that one particular trip home where a thick fog began to roll across the road and you drove right through it. You're removed from your car, strapped down to a table as drills are pushed through your ears. Your screams echo through a soulless stainless steel facility as aliens from another world steady you like a bug? What if all these memories come flooding back? All the times that we've been put under by these alien forces, all the times we've been abducted, all the times that we thought were just normal events where we just kind of lost time. Not to a huge degree, not to the point where your boss is like, you're late. You're late for the 8th time this week. We're driving through fog banks. Just times you're sitting at home and you're like, wow, the night just flew by. I came home, turned on YouTube, and the next thing I know, it's 10 o'clock. It's because those memories were the events that truly happened to us. We don't remember them. We are instead given a Cliff Notes version of a typical night that is pasted over our psyche. So we can tell something's a little off. We can tell that's weird. I went to sleep and then I woke right back up and I feel like I didn't get any rest. I feel like I just fell asleep. Then my alarm went off. That's weird. We all have that experience. But these are times that these creatures have interacted with us and we were unaware of it. And I'm picking dramatic examples. It could honestly be times where you swear you heard something outside. You heard something outside your bedroom window and you get up and you look because it's a little unnerving. You're like, what? Get up, look, and you look out in the yard. There's nothing there. And we always tell ourselves, it was nothing. It's just the wind. We go back to our business. But just looking out the window isn't good enough. Hearing something in your basement and getting a little suspicious and grabbing a flashlight and looking down in your basement and seeing nothing, that's not good enough. Because she looked out the window and saw nothing. Went back to sleep as the reptilians got closer and closer. So imagine if, as you're laying there dying, waiting for the peace that only death can bring, what if in those final hours of life, you're not flooded with memories of friends and family? You're not slowly letting go of regrets and anger. Instead, you remember all those little times in your life when you looked out the window or looked in the basement. The times you felt something was off but just said, must have been nothing. What if in the final moments of life, that is what you see? You see the nothings that were truly something. All the mental blocks that had been placed there by these alien interlopers just go away, evaporate. And all you're left with is a lifetime of horrendous memories you didn't even remember having. The last memories you have of life is the alien scalpel digging into your eye. Your mouth being pried open as an implant is shoved underneath your teeth. The feeling of being strapped down to a table in the darkness as you hear the cries of countless other humans begging for mercy. You may think that's impossible. You may think that's not going to happen, Jason. But remember, Carol's mother looked out that window and saw nothing. Yet those memories came flooding back. How many times have you heard something or felt something suspicious and looked out a window and saw nothing? What did you really see? What was really out there on the other side of the glass, staring right back at you? DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be your email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal conspiracy and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.